Hi, my name's Evie Hatch and I'm here at the Bankside Gallery with Chris Longridge, who is the artist behind Venus and Cupid, which was the winner of the Portrait Award at Jackson's Painting Prize this year. Your painting combines domesticity, mythology and Baroque portraiture, but before we talk about that, could you tell us about your journey to becoming an artist?
Sure. I mean, I started painting when I was very, very young. Well, I liked making things more than I liked anything else. And I carried on all through teenage years. I didn't go to art college because in the late 80s, the idea of for a boy from Devon making a career out of art was just inconceivable. So I went to university to do a different subject instead and got a day job, and I've had a career ever since then. But I've been painting all that time, and through my 20s and 30s, I was kind of bang my head against the window of the art business trying to get in, and it's very, very difficult. So there weren't many opportunities. With the internet, things have loosened up and made it a lot better. Competitions like this one mean that there's an open access for people who don't come through the traditional route, like myself. And that's kind of what I've done the last 10 years. I've really focused on doing that kind of thing, and it's gone from strength to strength.
How did this painting, Venus and Cupid, how did that come about?
Well, all my paintings generally start with a photo or another painting by someone else, just an image that inspires me for whatever reason. And then I'll usually, if it is a photo, I'll take that photo, put it into Photoshop, move it around, and try and break down what it is that I actually like about it, because it's my instincts usually that are telling me this is the one, but I don't know why. And I don't know why until I've broken it down a little bit and rebuilt it. And I even don't know why until after I've finished painting sometimes why it is that one particularly appealed to me. I just know that there's something there. And so in Photoshop, I'll move things around and I'll change colors, or I'll change position, I'll change the lighting, and get a sense of what I want to do with this thing. And then I paint the results. And then once that painting's up there, I can then make more changes, adjust it, think, oh, right, that actually needs to be a little bit more over here, and that needs to be under there. Oh, that needs to be brighter, needs to go backwards, need more three-dimensionality here. So this was just a picture that was of my wife and son when he was young. It was an old picture. I've been sitting on it for a long time. I wasn't ready to do it yet. The mythological reference was just impossible to ignore, because there's a little naked boy holding a bow and arrow. And I didn't pose him. This a completely candid picture of him sitting on his bed, and my wife was next to him, giving him a cuddle, and he just wants to fire his bow and arrow. And I thought, well, I can really do something with this, so that's what I did.
I was wondering about that because digital really does come into your work. What place do you think painting has in a post-digital world in general?
Well, it does have a place, and I struggle with this. Every time that I do a painting, I have to ask myself, why am I painting this? Why am I not just leaving it as it is? Why not I just change it in Photoshop and leave it as a digital image? And the answer is that paint has a material, it's a fact, it's there in front of you, and the presence of paint does something to you as a viewer. Looking at something as a painting, you're very aware that someone has committed to every single brushstroke you're looking at, which is not the same as there could be enormously complicated digital works, but it's more obvious to you as a viewer without knowing anything about the artist that this is something that has been constructed. And that construction is part of the experience when you're viewing it.
Why do you show the technological influence within the work?
Because I think it's really important to acknowledge that technology plays a part in what we are doing these days. There's no need to pretend that I'm actually a Baroque painter, for example, because I'm not. I'm a 21st century painter, and I've been using Photoshop as part of my process, and I think it's absolutely no problem revealing that within the work itself. It's important that a painting not deny that it's a painting. This is why I talk about having brushstrokes, the material fact of the paint. It goes back to kind of what Clement Greenberg used to say about paint is paint and surface is surface. So even if you're doing representational painting, you can still do that and adhere to those kind of principles of acknowledging the paint. And that's the same with technology. Acknowledge the technology as well as the paint in the final work.
Which I think is really interesting in terms of the impact, the kind of absolutely transformative impact that photography had on painting and the way that changed painting. Because painting had to become something else. It had to do something that the photography wasn't doing. So the relationship between photography and painting, I think, is always, I think you're right, you can't really deny it, can you?
Yeah, and I think that actually what you're talking about there, and the rise of abstraction as well, is like breaking those until then had been hard, fast rules about composition and colour and balance and all these kind of things. But once they've been broken, you can start to put them back together, and not in a way that denies the fact that they needed to be broken, because they did, but in a way that embraces the value that they had and can still have. So I really love classical composition. And even though my piece here, Venus and Cupid, is very much broken up and it appears to be kind of shattered in a way, actually, if you look closely, it follows really quite strict, sort of almost Rubens-esque, the spiral following into it leads the eye in the way, and there are crisscross lines that you kind of wouldn't have necessarily expected to see, but when you look at them, oh, right, that's why my eye's being drawn in certain places in certain ways. Now, they're not being done for the same reasons that Adagio might have done, but they are using, this is just another tool, is what I'm saying. So you don't have to throw those tools away simply because the reality of them has been acknowledged by abstract artists who say, well, actually, these aren't the law, they're just a tool.
You use a lot of technology in your work. Do you think that AI is a threat for artists working going forward?
To fine artists, it is less of a existential threat, but it is actually more of a tool that can be used and embraced. I'm working on a piece at the moment which kind of reconfigures Rubens, and one of Rubens' paintings of the Apostles, in fact, St. Simon. Now, it's interesting to me, when I did research about this particular painting, that we don't know anything about St. Simon. Nothing except his name, St. Simon the Zealot. That's the only mention in the Bible is a list with him in it by his name. There's nothing else is known. So when Rubens was creating that incredible portrait, this really humane, beautiful, serene, thoughtful painting, he completely made up out of thin air. Is out of nothing. And so when we're thinking about AI being this terrible thing, actually there's kind of like a tradition of extrapolating from incomplete data sets, if you like, because that's sort of what Rubens was doing too. Now, I know an AI doing it and an artist doing it are two very different things, but imagine what Rubens could be doing using AI as a launch pad, as a starting point. So I don't think it's necessarily like the big villain that everyone says, but if I were a commercial artist, then yes, I would think, shut up, Chris. Yes, it really is terrible.
You're primarily an oil painter, is that right? Yes. Yeah. What materials can you not live without?
Well, I mean, I say that I'm primarily an oil painter, and I am, but only for the last 4 or 5 years. I was always acrylics before that, because they're cleaner and tidier and you don't need any special tuition to know how to use them. I thought oils, you have to be a grown-up to use oils. And so for years I wasn't really a grown-up. And then I just did it and realized, oh, actually, you don't need special expertise. You learn it as you go along, just as you do with everything else. So actually, I always had acrylics as well. And in fact, Venus and Cupid was underpainted with acrylic with oil over the top. So I blocked in the color with acrylic because it's just so much quicker and easier to do that way. And then I thought, well, I can just cover parts of it or all of it. Doesn't matter. I think in the end, it was nearly all of it was covered in oil, but not all of it entirely. Aside from them, I think I prefer to paint, like in an ideal world, if I had like a studio and an assistant and all the rest of it, I'd always be painting on home primed linen, hand stretched, which I do, but yeah, it's expensive and it's hard work stretching that. And, I always worry that when I have stretched it, it's then going to go all wobbly again and I'm going to have to try and re-stretch it. And, when you buy them pre-stretched, they're probably going to stay the way they are. But I'll paint on whatever surface I've got to hand. I paint on MDF, like Venus and Cupid. I've painted on canvas board, linen, canvas, all sorts of surfaces. Yeah.
Oil paint is also, I suppose, kind of connects you to that inheritance of art history that you look back to, Baroque portraiture. Which artists do you think have inspired you the most in your work?
Well, actually, when I was starting out, Lucian Freud was the most important one because I really just love that kind of chunky impasto kind of style, which I've never actually managed to do myself. My work always goes on thin, no matter what I do. I can slap it on and still by the end of it, I've managed to kind of smooth it all down, so failing at mine. But then as I got older, more recently, I've kind of very much got into Caravaggio, Dentelleschi, Rubens, people of the 17th century. And you probably see it in Venus and Cupid that there's an influence of the chiaroscuro and the colour contrasts and that kind of thing.
You've been a contestant more than once on Sky Art's Portrait Artist of the Year. What do you think is the key to getting a likeness in a portrait? It's a bit of a tough question maybe, but... Well,
no, it's not. It's the question is more like how important is the likeness in a portrait? Because as anyone who's got a camera, as we all do now, knows, you can take a picture of someone and it's still not actually a likeness, even though it's 100% faithful. It's still not a likeness. So I think we can all learn something from caricaturists. You don't necessarily have to exaggerate particular features. You don't have to make a cartoon for a likeness, but you have to observe and notice what are the salient features and emphasize them in certain ways, or at least consider when you're posing someone or image you're choosing to paint them from, that those features, what those features are looking like in relation to the other parts of the face and the body, and that actually tells you about this person. So it's quite hard to paint a portrait of someone who you've never met before. But you know a lot more about people just from being in their presence than you would think, even without speaking to them. And that is something that you can focus on when you're making a portrait of somebody. Consider how they hold themselves, how they relate to the space around them, relate to the other people around them, how they look under certain lights, all those kind of things. And these are choices you can make from doing a light.
How do you know when a painting is finished?
I don't know when a painting is finished. I know when, if I do any more to it, it will definitely make it worse. But up to that point, I've been tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. Because I often think, all right, yes, that's done now. And then 30 seconds later, I'll turn back and I'll realize I've not been looking at the painting. I've been looking at a little part of the painting, or the part that I was focusing on. And if you look at the whole thing, you realize, oh yeah, that's out of whack. So you go back and you change it. And this can go on for weeks when you're just, no, I just need to, that last little bit. But yeah, I forget who said it, but like every artist needs a little imp on his shoulder with a hammer to hit him when it's done. But you never really know.
I think it's an interesting question, that, because I think you kind of find, eventually you kind of find that it's not really an ending point, is it? It's kind of a balancing point, the kind of the tipping point.
There is a point when I've done the stage one, it looks like this, my reference image, where I could say, right, enough, but I know that it's not as good as it could be at that point. But when I've been tinkering long enough, I know that I'm not actually making it better each time. There's a point at which I'm not making it better. I'm just tinkering because I don't want to let go. So I don't want to admit that I'm never going to make it as perfect as it could have been.
Yeah.
You know, there's that ideal perfect painting in your head. You don't know what it looks like necessarily, but you know how you'll feel when you've seen it. And you never ever achieve that, unfortunately, which is what makes you do the next one, because the last one was never good enough.
How did it feel to win the Portrait Award this year at Jackson's Painting Prize?
It feels amazing. It's really, really good. It's so validating for someone who didn't come up through the traditional way as an artist. So you always feel like they know something that I don't, the keys to the kingdom, if you like, which isn't true. Of course it isn't true. But it still makes you feel, I am an artist. You know, I really am. And I just want a prize. It's incredible.
Do you think it will motivate you to enter more prizes in the future?
Certainly will, yeah. I'll be entering every one that I can go for, because it's great to just, winning the prize in itself is fantastic, but coming to an event like this where you get a private view, I don't get to exhibit on my own because I can't afford to do a solo exhibition. I don't know enough other artists in my community where we can put on a group show. So an event like this is just fantastic for me.